I wasn't expecting the call. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was at the gym, halfway through my second set of squats when my phone buzzed. I checked it, half considering ignoring the notification, but something made me glance at the screen anyway. A number I didn't recognize. I picked it up, and before I could even greet the person on the other end, I was hit with anger. "Is this John Walker?" the voice barked. I said, "Yes. Who is this?" The voice immediately became louder. "You don't get to dodge this anymore. You owe money, and I want it paid immediately. $15,000. $15,000, and don't think you can avoid me." I almost hung up. It seemed ridiculous. I didn't owe anyone that kind of money. I wasn't behind on anything, certainly not $15,000. But I stayed on the line. The voice was relentless, going on and on, mentioning loans, accounts, and transactions that I'd never heard of. I tried to interrupt, but they weren't listening. They just kept going. Something felt off, but I couldn't place it. Finally, I managed to speak. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't owe you any money." The response was almost mocking. "Oh, we'll see about that. You'll get the papers soon enough." And then they hung up. I remember staring at my phone for a long time, trying to piece it together. Who was that? Why were they calling me? And why $15,000? At first, I thought it was some sort of scam. I blocked the number and tried to forget about it. But 3 days later, I got another call, this time from a law office. They said the same thing. I owed $15,000, and if I didn't pay, I'd be facing legal action. They gave me details about an account, a bank, and loans that didn't match anything I knew. I tried to trace it. I went over my finances, but there was nothing. No credit accounts I hadn't opened, no loans, no debts. Yet the calls kept coming. They started sending me letters, not just from collection agencies, but from banks too. I could no longer ignore it. I went to my bank, I went to the credit bureau, I spent hours on the phone trying to track down where all of this was coming from. That's when the first hint of the truth surfaced. I was at the credit bureau when the agent pulled up my file. "You've been flagged for identity theft," she said. At that moment, I thought I'd heard wrong. "What do you mean, identity theft?" She told me someone had used my personal information to open accounts, take out loans, and default on payments. The details were horrifying, all the signs of a well-thought-out fraud. My credit had been destroyed, and I was on the hook for a debt that I had never incurred. But the more I dug, the more confusing it became. The accounts had all been opened under my name, but with different addresses. The loan application forms had my signature, but the handwriting was off. My gut told me this wasn't random. This wasn't just some stranger who stole my identity. Then I found out who it was. It came up one evening when my mom, Linda, asked me to stop by the house. My sister, Emily, was there. We hadn't spoken much in the last few months, so it wasn't unusual, but something about the timing was off. She was acting strange, fidgety, like she was trying to hide something. I didn't expect the confrontation. Emily, sitting there across the table, looked more uncomfortable than I had ever seen her. I confronted her. I asked her directly, "Emily, did you use my information?" The color drained from her face. She looked away. My heart stopped. The silence that followed felt longer than it was. Then, barely above a whisper, she muttered, "I didn't mean to." I didn't understand. "What do you mean you didn't mean to?" That's when she told me the truth, or at least part of it. She'd used my name to open up a credit line. It started with something small, a credit card, just for a few things she needed, but then it escalated. She'd been borrowing money, getting loans, racking up debt. At first, it was all for things she couldn't afford. Then it turned into something bigger. Her story shifted from remorse to a kind of strange justification, as if it had become normal for her to do this to me without even realizing how it would end. The weight of what she had done hit me like a truck. I didn't know what to say. My sister, the person I had always trusted, had systematically destroyed my life. When I told my parents, Linda and David, what had happened, I was still in shock. They listened, then they told me something that still stings to think about. They didn't want me to press charges. They said she was family. They said she's going through a rough time. Don't let this ruin her life. I didn't know what to do. I was faced with a moral dilemma I never thought I'd have to face. Do I let her walk free, as my parents suggested, or do I fight for the justice I deserved? I spent days and days trying to figure it out. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust. It was about betrayal. It was about a part of me that I thought I knew, but didn't. In the end, I made a choice, but it wasn't the easy one. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't pretend it didn't happen. So I filed a report. I had no choice. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that my sister had done something so deliberate, so cruel, without a second thought for the damage it would cause. It wasn't the path I wanted to take, but it was the only one that would restore the balance I needed. And then, Emily, she disappeared from my life. Before I tell you everything, and I mean everything, you need to understand who I am. Because this story only makes sense when you know what I had and what was taken from me. My name is John Walker. I grew up in a house where money was always the problem. My parents, Karen and Michael, fought about bills. There were months where things were tight in ways kids shouldn't have to notice, but I noticed every single time. The way my dad would look at the envelope with the overdue notice, the way my mom would try to hide it as if she could shield me from the weight of it. The late-night whispers between my parents when they thought I was asleep. Do we pay the mortgage this month or the car loan? It was subtle, but it stuck with me. I couldn't ignore it, even if they tried to shelter me from it. And it didn't just stop at the tension between them. I saw the strain in their eyes when I asked for new shoes or for money to go to a friend's birthday party. Sometimes they could do it, sometimes they couldn't. The feeling of not having enough was something I learned early on. It was a quiet kind of panic, one that I could feel in the pit of my stomach, one that seemed to linger over every conversation, every decision. I promised myself, and I mean promised, that I would never live like that. I didn't want to feel that same weight, that constant stress about money. I didn't want to grow up watching my parents fight over bills or wonder if we would have enough for the things we needed, so I made a vow. I would do whatever it took to ensure that I would never face the same fears they did. I would take control of my finances, and I would never let money rule my life the way it ruled theirs. So I became obsessive about money. Not in a reckless way, not in the way some people do, obsessed with acquiring wealth for the sake of status or prestige. No, for me, it was about control. It was about making sure that I was always prepared. I have 2 credit cards, just 2, and I pay them off before the due date, every month, without fail. I don't just stick to the minimum payment, I go over. I built an emergency fund, setting aside 6 months' worth of living expenses in a high-yield savings account. I invested a significant portion of my income every month in a diversified portfolio. I don't take out loans unless it's absolutely necessary, and when I do, I pay them off on time every time. I followed the rules. I was, by every definition, financially responsible. And that wasn't something I said to pat myself on the back. It was just what I believed. It was the foundation I'd built my life on. I thought that if I followed the rules, if I kept track of my credit, if I managed my finances carefully, everything would fall into place. I had control. I had security, and that meant I could breathe easy. But then, what happened next made no sense. It shook everything I thought I knew about myself, my life, and the people I trusted. At the time, life was actually really good. I was in a stable relationship with Rachel, the love of my life. We had just gotten engaged, and we were making plans. We were talking about our future, a house, maybe even a family. We were making decisions that were about us, building something solid, something lasting. My career was moving forward, and my finances were in the healthiest place they had ever been. I was hitting my financial goals. Rachel and I had just sat down and mapped out everything we wanted for the next 5 years. We were building a life that felt real, something you could touch and hold on to. Everything felt like it was finally coming together. I had never felt so sure. I had never felt so certain that everything would be okay. I had control. My life was stable. I was secure. And then the call came. It was a random Saturday afternoon. I was at the gym, halfway through my second set of squats when my phone buzzed. I checked it, half considering ignoring it, but something made me glance at the screen anyway. A number I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was just another spam call, but then I picked it up. "Is this John Walker?" the voice barked. I froze. It wasn't a familiar voice. It sounded angry, frantic, but more than that, it was assertive. It was almost as though the person had been waiting for me to pick up. I could hear it in the tone. "Yes, who is this?" I managed to say, trying to shake off the surprise. "You don't get to dodge this anymore," the voice continued, growing louder. "You owe me money, and I want it paid immediately. $15,000. $15,000, and don't think you can avoid me." I almost hung up. It seemed ridiculous. I didn't owe anyone that kind of money. I wasn't behind on anything, certainly not $15,000. But I didn't hang up. Something stopped me. Maybe it was the tone in the voice, desperate, aggressive. Maybe it was the urgency that felt too real to ignore. The voice kept going, relentless. They mentioned loans, accounts, and transactions I had never heard of. They kept saying I owed them money, that if I didn't, there would be legal consequences. But none of it made sense. I had no idea what they were talking about. Finally, I spoke. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't owe you any money." The voice on the other end seemed to chuckle, almost mockingly. "Oh, we'll see about that. You'll get the papers soon enough." And then they hung up. I stood there in the gym for a moment, my heart racing. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't figure out what. I almost let it go, but that voice, it stuck with me. I couldn't shake it. The next few days were a blur. More calls came. Another one from a law office. They said the same thing. I owed $15,000, and if I didn't, I'd face legal action. They gave me details about an account, a bank, and loans that didn't match anything I knew. I tried to trace it. I went over my finances, but there was nothing. No credit accounts I hadn't opened, no loans, no debts. Yet the calls kept coming, relentless, growing more and more aggressive. They started sending me letters, not just from collection agencies, but from banks too. That's when I realized something was wrong. Something was really wrong. I went to the credit bureau, hoping to find some answers. The agent pulled up my file. She looked at me with a mix of concern and professionalism. "You've been flagged for identity theft," she said, her voice softer now. At first, I thought I'd heard wrong. "What do you mean, identity theft?" She explained that someone had used my personal information to open accounts, take out loans, and default on payments. The details were horrifying. My credit had been destroyed, and I was on the hook for a debt I hadn't incurred. But as I dug deeper, it only got worse. The accounts had all been opened under my name, but with different addresses. The loan applications had my signature, but the handwriting was off. It didn't make sense. This wasn't a random act. This wasn't just some thief using my information. This was someone close. Someone who knew me. That's when I discovered the truth. It wasn't a stranger who stole my identity. It was my sister, Sophie, my own flesh and blood. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the fact that she'd destroyed my credit. It was the betrayal. The fact that someone I'd always trusted, someone who grew up in the same house, had the same front row seat to our parents' struggles, had taken everything from me. I never imagined Sophie, of all people, could do this. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept it. But the evidence was there, clear as day. And in that moment, my entire world shifted. I thought I knew my sister, but I didn't know her at all. It was a Saturday. I was at the gym, mid-workout, when my phone lit up. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Maybe it was the thought that it could be important. Maybe it was instinct, some tiny sense of warning I couldn't shake off. Either way, I answered. The voice on the other end wasn't calm. It wasn't the kind of voice you expect when someone's calling about a late payment or a missed bill. No, this voice was angry, furious. "You John Walker?" the voice demanded, cutting right through the usual pleasantries. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep it casual, but feeling the unease build in my chest. "Who's this?" They didn't waste time. "You owe us money, $15,000. You need to pay up now." I froze. I knew something wasn't right. I had no idea what they were talking about. $15,000? That wasn't even close to anything I'd ever owed. No late payments, no debts hanging over me. "I'm sorry, what account?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I genuinely didn't know what they were talking about. They read off a balance. They read off a card I'd never opened, a card I'd never touched. I tried to keep up, but the words didn't make sense. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have an account with you. This is a mistake." The voice didn't believe me, not one bit. "We've been trying to reach you for months. You think you can just dodge us?" "Listen," I said, a little more firmly, "there's been some kind of mix-up. I don't owe you anything. This isn't my account." But they didn't care. They started threatening me with legal action, escalating it. "You'll pay, or we'll see you in court." I barely had time to say another word before they hung up. I stood there for a long moment, just staring at my phone. My mind was spinning. I had no idea what had just happened. I wasn't the kind of person who ignored debts. I didn't have accounts I didn't recognize. So why was this happening? Who was this person? And why was I suddenly being accused of something I hadn't done? I should have let it go. I should have brushed it off as some kind of scam. But something in my gut told me to dig deeper. I went home later that day, unsettled. I couldn't focus. The gym, the workout, it all felt like a distant memory. The call had rattled me in a way I couldn't explain. I sat down at my desk and started pulling everything together. Credit reports, account statements, every financial document I could access. I was meticulous. I needed to see everything, cross-check it. I wanted to find something, anything that could explain what had happened. What I found made my stomach drop. There wasn't just one account I didn't recognize. There were multiple. Credit cards opened in my name, loan applications filed under my information. And one of them had a billing address on file that I did recognize. But it wasn't my address. It wasn't anywhere I'd ever lived. It was Leah's address. My sister, Leah. My sister's apartment, a place I hadn't visited in over a year. I just stared at the screen. I kept scrolling, looking at the details. The credit numbers, the transaction history. It was all there, and it was all in my name. But it wasn't me. It wasn't anything I had authorized. But it had her address. Something twisted in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. I had to pause. I had to take a minute to make sense of it. But I couldn't. There was no way to make sense of it. My mind was working in circles, desperate to find another explanation, something that could explain this away. I kept thinking, there has to be another explanation. Maybe someone just used her address randomly. Maybe the credit bureau made a mistake. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed. I kept telling myself that. Anything other than what it obviously was. But I couldn't ignore it. The facts were staring me in the face. My sister's address, her apartment. And that was just the beginning. I called my parents, Karen and Michael. They were visiting Leah that weekend. I didn't want to accuse anyone outright, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was wrong. So I asked them to look into it. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe it was that they would find a mistake, something that would make it all fall apart and show me that this was just a misunderstanding. But what they found ended any doubt I had. What they found ended any doubt I had. My father's voice cracked through the silence when he called me back. John, it's true. We found paperwork with your name on it and Leah's address. It's all there. I don't remember much after that. It's all a blur. My mind was too busy spinning, processing, trying to figure out how this could be happening. How had my sister done this to me? Why? I don't know how I made it through the next few hours, the next few days. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just some mistake. This was something deliberate, something cold. And I was going to have to confront it, no matter what. My parents confronted Leah. They didn't go easy on her. They were angry, and they had every right to be. The truth hit them harder than it hit me, maybe because they never saw it coming. My mom called me that afternoon, her voice low and shaking. She told me they'd found something, and I knew right away what she meant. In Leah's purse, my national ID, my driver's license, documents I thought I had lost years ago, documents I'd spent time and money replacing because I believed they were gone. But there they were, sitting underneath credit cards, multiple credit cards, all with my name on them. Leah had been holding on to them. She had been using them, and she hadn't just kept them hidden in a drawer somewhere. No, she carried them around with her like they were just part of her routine, like they were hers. But they weren't hers, they were mine. Let me be clear about what that means. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This wasn't a desperate mistake she made once and regretted. No, she had built an entire operation using my name. She had kept my ID documents hidden. She had deliberately, methodically, over a period of time, become me. Financially, on paper, she had become me and run up $15,000 in debt while doing it. The betrayal hit me in waves. I felt like I was choking on it, but I couldn't stop myself from going through it over and over in my head. How could she? How long had this been happening? How many times had she stood by me, smiling while hiding this from me? And it wasn't just about the money. It was about the trust I had in her, the sister I thought I knew. It wasn't just stolen documents. It was the complete obliteration of everything I thought was real between us. The next few days, well, I didn't handle it with grace. I wish I could tell you that I was calm, collected, and rational through it all, but that would be a lie. I went through every stage of grief, and I went through them fast, hard, and ugly. First, there was denial. Maybe there's still an explanation. Maybe she didn't mean to do it. Maybe the cards were planted somehow. Maybe it was a mix-up. Maybe anything but the truth I was seeing in front of me. Then came anger. How could she do this to me? How long had she been doing it? Why? Why had she stolen from me, from us, from our family? The question echoed in my mind like an endless loop. The anger didn't just burn in my chest. It made me feel like I was suffocating, like I couldn't even think straight. Next came bargaining. Okay, I thought, maybe if I just talk to her directly, we can fix this. She'll admit it, right? She'll understand how bad this is. Maybe we can work out a deal, a way to make it right. Then came depression. I'll never forget that night. It was 2 a.m., and I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, staring at a credit report. My credit report. Only it wasn't my credit report. It was a version of me I never authorized. A version of me that didn't exist in the way I had built it. I had worked so hard to keep my finances in line, to make sure I never slipped up. But here I was, staring at someone else's mess. It felt like I was drowning. I felt lost. I had no control over anything anymore. And finally, acceptance. This happened. This is real. Now what? That's what I kept asking myself. What the hell do I do now? But while I was still processing all of this emotionally, the debt collectors found me. It didn't take long. First, it was my phone. The calls started coming in, one after the other. Unknown numbers, blocked numbers, relentless, unyielding. They didn't care that I didn't owe them anything. They didn't care about me. They just wanted their money. And they didn't stop there. They went to my social media accounts. They messaged me, and then they messaged people connected to me. Friends, coworkers, Rachel, everyone. They started digging into my life, trying to get to me however they could. But that wasn't the worst part. No. They crossed a line that I will never forget. They made threats, not just about the debt. No, they went further. They mentioned Rachel. They mentioned my pets. These people, hired to collect money that I didn't owe, were using intimidation tactics that were far beyond what I could have imagined. They went after the people I loved, the people who had nothing to do with this. I want you to sit with that for a second. I was being threatened over a debt my sister created. My sister. The person who I thought I could trust, my family, my future spouse Rachel was being dragged into this. My pets who couldn't even understand what was happening were being used as leverage. And I hadn't done a single thing wrong. If you've never had debt collectors come after you for something you didn't do, consider yourself lucky. because there is a specific kind of helpless rage that comes from being hunted for someone else's crime. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. My sister had destroyed my life, and now these people were trying to destroy everything I cared about. I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't stay silent. I had to do something, anything. But the truth was, I had no idea how to fight back against this, against her, against the mess she made of everything I'd worked hard for. And the worst part? I was only beginning to understand just how deep this betrayal ran. Obviously, the first thing I did was look into legal options. I wasn't naive. I knew that identity theft was a crime. What Leah did wasn't a gray area. It was illegal. She had stolen my personal information, used it to open accounts and run up debts. It was black and white. I wanted to pursue it. I wanted her to face the consequences for what she had done. So I reached out. I spoke to people who knew about this kind of thing. I called a lawyer, talked to a few legal experts, and tried to get an understanding of what my options were. The answer I kept getting was the same. Yes, you have a case. But then came the part I didn't want to hear. They told me that Leah owned nothing. No property, no significant assets, nothing that could be used to get any money out of her even if I won in court. The debts? $15,000. The potential recovery? Nothing. The lawyers all said the same thing. Even if I managed to win, the cost of the case would outweigh any amount I could possibly recover. It was a lost cause. The legal system had nothing to offer me except the option to pursue criminal charges. But even that wasn't a straightforward path. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, with evidence of my sister's wrongdoing, and the system was telling me I couldn't do anything about it. Nothing. It felt like I was hitting a brick wall at every turn. I was powerless, unable to do anything that would force Leah to pay for what she had done. The entire system was failing me. So I did the next thing that seemed like the logical step. I went to the police. I was ready. I had everything. Documentation, physical evidence. I had the billing address, my ID documents found in her possession. I had a paper trail that pointed directly at Leah. I knew it wasn't just me making baseless accusations. I had proof, real, irrefutable evidence. But then my parents called. It was a quiet conversation, the kind where you can hear the weight of the decision hanging in the air. I could feel the hesitation in their voices before they even spoke, and when they did, it wasn't what I expected. They asked me not to go to the police. At first, I couldn't process what they were saying. What do you mean, don't go to the police? They explained that Leah had just had a baby, a newborn, and, as they told me, they couldn't bear the thought of that child growing up without their mother in the home. They were trying to protect their granddaughter from the fallout of a decision that they feared would change everything. I need to stop here and ask you something, because this is the part of the story where people have the strongest reactions. What would you have done? If it was your sibling? If there was a newborn involved? If the people who raised you were begging you to let it go? What would you have done? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Because for me, that decision was the hardest part of this whole mess. I made a choice that I'm still not sure was right, but I made it. I didn't go to the police. Not because I forgave Leah. I hadn't. Not because I thought she deserved protection. I didn't. But because I couldn't shake the image of that baby's face in the back of my mind. Every time I thought about what Leah had done, I also saw that newborn, helpless, innocent. And I realized I couldn't be the reason that child's first years were defined by absence. I couldn't be the one to make sure that my sister went to jail, knowing that her baby would grow up without a mother, without any real understanding of why. It was a choice I'll always question, but at that moment, I felt like it was the only way forward. And that decision cost me, in more ways than one. Not just in the legal sense, but in a way I didn't anticipate. By letting Leah off the hook, by not holding her accountable, I lost a piece of myself. I lost the trust I had in family, in the system, and in the idea of what justice really means. I had every right to pursue her, to make her pay for what she'd done. But instead, I let it go. And even now, I'm not sure I'll ever be able to fully reconcile that choice. It felt like I was sacrificing justice for mercy. And while I know mercy is important, it came at a personal cost that I didn't see coming. I paid it. Every cent. $15,000 plus. Money I had earned, money I had saved, protected, and been careful about my entire adult life. Gone. Just like that. To cover a debt that was never mine. I want you to understand what $15,000 represents. It's not just numbers on a screen. It's months, years of disciplined saving. It's the emergency fund I'd built step by step for moments just like this. It's a chunk of investment growth I had been nurturing for my future. Gone. Never to be seen again. That money wasn't just sitting there as an abstract concept. It was the culmination of hours I worked, of decisions I made, of habits I maintained. It was all handed over, not to something I needed, but to fix a mess I didn't create. Every time I looked at that payment, every time I transferred another chunk of my savings, I felt like I was being gutted. And in those moments, it wasn't just the money that stung. It was the realization that I was giving up everything I'd worked for, everything I had planned. It was the embodiment of all the sacrifices I had made for my financial stability, taken from me, like I was powerless to stop it. But there was no other choice. The debt collectors didn't care, the bank didn't care, and as much as I wanted to fight, as much as I wanted to scream at the injustice of it all, I knew there was only one way to get out from under the shadow of this disaster. I had to pay. So I did. Leah apologized, eventually. I don't know how long it took her, but it felt like an eternity before she said the words. "I'm sorry," she told me, her voice small, almost hesitant. "I didn't know how to explain what I was thinking. I didn't know how to fix it, but I will. I'll make it right someday." And I listened. I really did. But then I said something I'd been holding on to since the moment I found out. I told her, an apology doesn't unseal a credit report. An apology doesn't give me back the nights I couldn't sleep. An apology doesn't remove the image of a debt collector threatening my fiancé from my memory. An apology is words, and words, at this point, mean nothing to me coming from you. I saw the hurt in her eyes, but it didn't matter. The damage had already been done. The apology felt like a formality, a weak attempt to erase the chaos she had caused. But it didn't work. No apology could fix what she'd done to me, to my life, to my future. The damage wasn't just financial, it was emotional too, and the weight of it was something I didn't know how to carry. The money, the credit, the legal fights, they were one thing, but this was personal. This was family. This was betrayal. And no matter how many sorries Leah could muster, I knew that the wound wouldn't heal just because she said the right words. After it was all settled, the debt paid, the accounts disputed, the reports filed, I sat down and did something I'd never done before. I let myself feel the full weight of it, not just the financial loss, but the betrayal, the pain of being wronged by someone you shared DNA with, someone who sat at the same dinner table, who knew exactly how hard you worked for everything you had and chose you as their target anyway. I let it all sink in. The emotional toll was harder to bear than the financial one. With the money, at least I could make a plan, a strategy to recover. But the trust, the feeling of safety I had once felt with my sister, that was gone, and I wasn't sure if I could ever get it back. Sitting there, in the quiet of my living room, I had to confront the truth. I had been manipulated, betrayed by the person who was supposed to have my back, someone I loved. And I realized that nothing about this would be easy to move past. The debt was paid, but the cost, the emotional cost, was something I was going to carry for a long time. Maybe forever. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what was taken from me, the sense of safety, the peace of mind, and the simple, naive belief that family would never do this to you. I had spent years building my financial life, carefully, cautiously. I had worked hard to ensure that nothing would come along and knock me down. But I wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't prepared for Leah. And I don't know if I ever will be.
Here's the thing about that year that I don't want to lose in all of this darkness. That same year, the year Leah stole from me, the year debt collectors threatened my family, the year I paid $15,000 for a crime I didn't commit, was also one of the best years of my life. I hit my investment goals, goals I'd set years earlier that had felt almost unreachable. I crossed them. It wasn't just the financial win, though. It was the feeling of knowing I could still stand up after everything that happened, that despite the financial blow, I wasn't broken. I was still moving forward, still building. I traveled to places I'd always dreamed of seeing, new countries, new perspectives, the kind of adventures that reminded me how vast the world is and how much beauty exists outside of the mess I'd been stuck in. It was as if life was telling me there is still more waiting for you. New landscapes, new people, new ways of seeing the world that couldn't be tainted by the darkness of my past year. And then, amidst all of it, came the best part. I got engaged to Rachel, to the person who sat with me through every horrible night of this, who answered debt collector calls with me, who held my hand when I was too exhausted to be angry anymore. She was the one who reminded me that I could keep going, even when I couldn't see the way forward. She asked me to spend my life with her, and for the first time in that entire year, I felt like everything was going to be okay. I said yes. I had the kind of love that made me feel whole again. That year, despite everything it threw at me, showed me that life doesn't stop. Not for anyone. It doesn't care if you've been wronged, if you've had your trust shattered, or if you're fighting battles you never signed up for.
It keeps moving. And so did I. I've thought a lot about what I want to take from all of this. Not the lesson Leah probably thinks she taught me, which is to trust no one. I refuse to live like that. I can't live with that kind of fear hanging over me. What I learned wasn't that everyone is out to hurt me, but that people can surprise you in the worst ways. And when they do, it doesn't mean you give up on everyone else. What I actually learned is this: life is not a transaction. You cannot be responsible enough, or kind enough, or careful enough to guarantee that people will treat you the same way. That's not how it works. You can do everything right and still get handed someone else's consequences. No matter how hard you try to control it, things will happen that you can't prevent. And that's the part that's hard to accept. But the question isn't whether it's fair. It's not. It isn't fair. The question is, what do you build after it? After everything crumbles, after everything that you thought was safe and certain falls apart, what do you do next? Do you let the pain define you, or do you find a way to keep building, to keep moving forward? I don't have all the answers, but I do know this. I wasn't going to let Leah's choices take everything from me. I wasn't going to let them control how I lived my life moving forward. My relationship with Leah is permanently changed. Some doors don't close, they just become walls. I don't hate her. Hate is too expensive, and I've already given her too much. But I don't trust her, and I never will again. Some things once broken don't get the chance to be rebuilt. The betrayal was too deep. But I'm not carrying the weight of that anymore. It's hers now. My parents and I have had hard conversations. They're still navigating their own guilt about how they handled it, about how they tried to protect Leah instead of standing by me when I needed it most. That's their work to do, not mine. I've let go of that part of it. I can't control how they feel or how they handle things, and I'm not going to carry their guilt for them. And me? I'm okay. More than okay, actually. It wasn't easy, and there are days where the weight of everything still sits with me. But I've rebuilt. Not just financially, but emotionally. I've learned how to trust again, how to move forward without being weighed down by the past. I have a future ahead of me. A life with Rachel. A life I'm proud of. I'm okay. More than okay. Because no matter how much Leah tried to take, I'm still standing. I wrote this, and I'm sharing this because I needed to close a chapter. Not for Leah, not for my parents, for me. Because sometimes the only way to put something down is to say it out loud, completely, from beginning to end, and then walk away from it. The weight of what happened, the layers of betrayal, the decisions I had to make, it all sat with me for so long. I don't think I ever realized how much I needed to share this story until I sat down to write it. The words, all of them, needed to come out. And now, finally, they've been said. If you've been through something like this, family betrayal, identity theft, being failed by the people who were supposed to protect you, I want you to know that the way you feel makes complete sense. The anger makes sense. The grief makes sense. And so does the part where you eventually, slowly, start to rebuild. It might feel like you're drowning in the aftermath. It might feel like everything has been taken from you, but you'll get through it. You will. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise that the rebuilding, the healing, does happen. I also want to be real with you about something practical. If you haven't checked your credit report recently, do it. Today, not tomorrow, today. You don't have to be in my situation to benefit from knowing exactly what's out there under your name. Financial vigilance isn't paranoia, it's protection. No one tells you about the messes that can happen when your identity is stolen until you're already in the middle of it. Don't wait. Don't put it off. Check your credit report, and then check it again in a few months. And if you are in a situation like mine right now, still in the middle of it, still trying to figure out what to do, please document everything. Every account, every statement, every conversation. Write it down, screenshot it, save it. Evidence matters, even when the system feels like it doesn't. Even when the process feels impossibly slow and the answers aren't coming. You need to protect yourself, and that starts with keeping track of everything. This year tried to take a lot from me, and it succeeded in some ways. It took money I'd earned. It took sleep I needed. It took the version of my sister I thought I knew. But it didn't take my future. It didn't take my fiancé. It didn't take my goals or my discipline or my belief that building something real is still worth doing, even when someone tries to tear it down. Life isn't fair. I know that now in a way I didn't before. But unfair doesn't mean over. It just means you adjust, you protect yourself better, and you keep going. You figure out how to keep moving forward even when it feels like the world is pushing against you. That's what I did. That's what I'm still doing. I'm not where I thought I would be, but I'm not where I was either. I've rebuilt. I'm rebuilding every day. And I'll keep rebuilding, one step at a time. If this story hit you in any way, if you've been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've had to make an impossible choice, if you've ever had to pay a price for someone else's decisions, leave a comment. I read them. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, you know what to do. Subscribe, share, and let me know your thoughts. Let's keep this conversation going.